The other part you said is the fact that when you wanted to go interview him, he kind of like, no, I'll let my executives talk to you, but not myself. And you said he's more on the private side. He doesn't like to, go and, talk about those tough conversations. Elon Musk on the opposite end, he's like total opposite. He'll tweet,
Right.
He'll go smoke weed with Joe. He'll go, hey, $69,000 for the Tesla, $420 a share. We're going to go buy it back. He's a troll master, chess master, game, all this stuff that he does. Why does Bezos like to be more private rather than public? Is it a personality thing, or is it just kind of he sees way too much risk in being in a public eye?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, Elon, their styles are so different. Elon has, everything that you described, but also he's, we can admit maybe that he's undisciplined. The tweets are, as likely to get him into trouble,
True.
either regulatory or legal, as whip his fans into a frenzy. It's his style. It's been unmistakably effective. He can do it in part because his ventures are really inspirational. Tesla and SpaceX. Bezos, maybe, yes, there's a personality difference. He's so disciplined and careful. The stories that he tells in interviews are like polished little stones that he's used and deployed over the years. I've heard them all. I could probably give the speech myself. At the same time, he is the CEO, the founder of a company that evokes much more complicated feelings in people. And that's rightly or not. But it's a retailer. It's competition is sympathetic, mom and pop businesses. It's sort of like, in some respects, Walmart, a juggernaut from afar that reaches into communities. It employs tons of people in everyone's local community. It's got complicated kind of tax relief schemes, and it's a lightning rod. It's occupied that place in the public imagination right now where people both depend on it, and in the same breath, after they're clicking the buy now button, they're criticizing it, right? And so maybe he has to be more careful. Maybe to sit down and make himself available like Elon does is, in some respects, dangerous, because he's going to be asked about taxes and relationship with the workers and competition. So I don't know, but he is just more disciplined and careful. And it's personality. He's not like a Steve Jobs or an Elon Musk where he can whip up his followers into, a frenzy of fandom. It's just, he's kind of still a geek, Patrick, when it gets down to it, a nerd.
So would you categorize, that's a good way of putting it. Would you say Musk, Jobs, Gates, Zuck, Bezos? Would you kind of say the personalities where Gates is a little bit more, he's been in the public eye more lately, right. Vaccine, all this other stuff. Here's what we need to do, challenges we're facing. But would you kind of put him more on the Gates and Zuck side than the Elon and Jobs side?
Maybe that's true. In some ways, I think he tries to be up here, hovering above it. He's so strategic in what he says and how he talks and where he does it. In some ways, it's when he talks, when he writes a letter to shareholders, when he gives an interview with a fellow billionaire on a stage somewhere, or when he talks about Blue Origin, a space company. It's tactical. He's trying to deliver a message. He's one of the things is he's just incredibly strategic with his time, and so partly it might be that. But when he does talk, there's always a goal and an end game. So I don't know that he's really even that consumed with his public image. He certainly does care about it, because you see him responding to criticism in his writing and the speeches he does give. But I think he just tries to sort of hover above it and no longer really cares, perhaps. And with $180 billion fortune, maybe he doesn't have to, cares that much about getting people to really understand him.
I think he cares, though. I think he cares because
he does. Yeah,
because he responded to Trump and his guy told him not to do it, and you were kind of talking about it yourself. Hey, just let it go. J. Cole, all that stuff that was going on, let it go. No, he responds, and they had this little battle going on back and forth. I ask because it's an old school style he has. This whole thing about being in the public eye is more new school. It's not old school. Social media has almost forced a lot of CEOs to be in a public eye. Generally, powerful business people were like, listen, just, I don't want to do a lot of interviews. Your publicist would say, don't talk to anybody. What if you say the wrong thing? Where today it's more like, let me go handle, let me respond back on Twitter, let me go do this. We have more access. So it does show a lot of discipline to him internally. As you did the interview from the first book to the second one, obviously on the second one, you're saying you didn't meet with him, but he did allow you to go and interview a lot of his executive, which is great. Did you ever read the book Accidental Millionaire that was written in the 80s? I want to say it was a book written in the 80s about jobs. And these were former employees that left. The book Accidental Billionaire about Zuck. Prior to Accidental Billionaire, there was a book called Accidental Millionaire. And it was written, when you read the book, you could tell it was written by a former employee who hated jobs. I mean, couldn't stand jobs. And in many documentaries, when they interview people that worked with jobs at his peak, you talk about Bully, which we'll get to chapter 3 here in a minute, but they say, how he was and how he would, flip out and this and that. When you were doing interviews from people recently, not 2013, I'm talking about recently, and interviewing former people as well as existing people, what things have you seen evolve in the last 8 years from 2012 to 2020, 2021?
In terms of the corporate culture or the
in terms of let's just say 2003, when you were talking to disgruntled employees who left, they would say, oh, he's so this. Maybe disgruntled employees that now left are saying something different. And the people that are there who are happy are saying something different. Like Bezos has changed because of ...
Yeah. Well, first of all, yes, there are disgruntled employees, but it's the preponderance of the workers that I've interviewed over the years, have been, I think, pretty sort of clear-eyed, and frank about their contributions, the pride they took at the work, but also some of the disadvantages or the leadership style that ultimately burned them out. So it's not quite disgruntled. It's sometimes exhausted or post-traumatic stress disorder from being lashed to a rocket ship, captained by a CEO who just never stopped. And in the early years, they described this leadership style that was brusque and demanding and sometimes demeaning and intimidating. And in the first book, The Everything Store, I tell all sorts of stories of Bezos saying remarkable things, like, why are you wasting my life? And Amazon Unbound, that leadership style has matured somewhat. He doesn't, he bottles that up, but he still has incredibly high standards, and he'll walk out of a room if he feels like employees haven't solved the problem or aren't betting big enough or thinking big enough or don't have an ingenious solution to something. I tell the story in Amazon Unbound of Alexa and the creation of Alexa, which he sponsored and got into the details of it. And it's really, this lesson for, I think, anybody in business of, not how just having the idea isn't enough, but you have to, as a CEO, sort of use your leadership magic to sponsor it, to get into the details, to understand the technical specifications, and then to allow your employees, as one says, I quote her in the book, is to be unbound, to not limit themselves in terms of how they're thinking or investing. The big question with Alexa was how they were going to test it. And ultimately, before launch, they bring it out into the world in disguise. And they rent apartments and houses and shroud the thing with acoustic fabric and get contractors to go through reciting scripts. And that's the only reason why I got smart enough to launch. And that was Bezos basically pushing his people. So yeah, I think the quality, the tenor of the testimony about the culture has changed, but in some ways it's just as difficult. It's just his leadership style softened a little bit.
So if you like this little short clip from an interview I did, click over here to watch the entire interview. And please don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.